Hey wonderful people! Today we're doing a character breakdown and we're going to learn how to draw Mario. And here I'm going for this kind of jumping, energetic pose, but because it is a character breakdown, I'm showing you how to draw the character by focusing on the basic shapes so that you could draw really any kind of position, movement that you want. And all you need to follow along this video is really any kind of drawing tools you want. It could be pencil and paper, it could be a digital art software. I personally will be using Procreate, and I'm going to give you tips along the way throughout the entire video on how to find tools depending on what you are working with. And with that said, grab your drawing tools and let's get started. So as I mentioned in the intro, we're going to do a character breakdown, and so we're going to start by just figuring out the basic shapes that come together to create Mario. And really here, understanding how the character is built is going to allow you to either redraw Mario in different positions, different settings, but it can also be really helpful to help you draw your own characters because it's going to give you a structure, a framework on how to build characters from scratch. So the first thing we're going to do here is simply, again, mapping out the basic shapes. So if you're working with pencil and paper, just start by pressing very, very lightly with your pencil because we're going to want to erase those shapes later. If you're working digitally, it's super easy. You're just going to create a new layer and you're going to rename that new layer to Sketch. And in terms of brushes for the sketch, it is entirely up to you, whatever you're comfortable with. I personally like sketching with something that feels like a pencil. So if you're working in Procreate, that would mean going in the sketching pack that comes with the app, if I can find it, right here, and picking something like the HB pencil or the 6B pencil. Or you could also use more specialized brush. For example, I have an illustration bundle. These brushes are not essential at all, but they might help you push your illustrations a little bit further. So if you want to check it out, it will be linked in the description below, and there's always a special promo code. But these brushes, again, are not essential at all, especially for this kind of video where we're doing a character breakdown. The brush, as long as you're comfortable with it, doesn't matter. That being said, if you do have my illustration bundle, we're going to pick from the texture pack that comes with it, the sketching brush. And similarly to the brush, you can sketch using any color of your choice. I personally like to sketch with a neutral gray, so that's what I'm going to go with. Now, Mario has a lot of different shapes, but they are all pretty similar in terms of the proportions. And what I mean by that is we're going to start by drawing one circle for the head, and then that circle is going to give us the information to draw pretty much everything else. So it's pretty straightforward. We're going to have a lot of shapes, so it's going to look messy, but that's good, that's normal. Just stick with it, trust the process. But as long as you start with that base shape and you keep referring to it, it's really not too hard. So we're really just going to start with that super loose circle that is going to be for the head. And we're just going to keep going. Using that circle, we're going to draw two more that are going to become the body. So very similar size to this one. It doesn't need to be perfect, but roughly the same size. And here again, I'm going with this kind of jumping position. So I'm going to make sure the body is in a bit of a diagonal from the head. If you wanted to have just standing Mario, you would draw your circles so that they're right below the head. And then another one that is roughly the same size but overlaps a little bit with the middle one. Great. So now that we have this circle for the head and the circles for the body, we're going to move on to drawing the arms and the legs. And they're both going to be just very basic cylinders. And again, we're going to use the height or the width. Honestly, it doesn't really matter which one is the same, but we're going to use the head as a reference to guide us in drawing these limbs. So we're going to start with the arms, and just to have a better idea of where to place them first, we're going to draw some very simple ovals on this top of the body, which would essentially be the shoulder socket. So in my case, I want to have one arm that is going backwards and then one arm that is going upwards. So I'm just going to draw one shoulder socket here and one shoulder socket there. From there, again, it's just going to be very simple cylinders, and the length of the arm is going to be the same as the width of the head. So you can just take 2 fingers to roughly measure the head, and then bring that over your shoulder socket to see roughly where the arm would end. So in my case, roughly here, and the same thing for this arm, roughly here. And then very simple, you're just finishing your your cylinder, sorry. Again, super messy as you can see. We have a bunch of lines. It looks absolutely ugly, but don't worry about it for now. We're really just figuring out the proportions as well as the positioning of the different elements. Great, so before moving on to the legs, which again are just going to be some cylinders, we're going to draw the hands because the hands are super easy. If you were drawing open hands, you would use the same size as the head, but in my case, again, since it's more of a fist, I'm going to go with a circle that is just the tiniest bit smaller than the head. So I can still use it as a reference to give me an idea, and then just go a little bit smaller than that. Same thing here. Now this time I'm going to use the hand that I already drew as a reference to make sure both are the same size. There we go. Great. Now the legs are going to be similar to the arms in the sense that, again, they're just going to be cylinders. But instead of using one width of the head, we're going to use two. So one width is going to be for the top of the leg and one width is going to be for the bottom of the leg. So knowing that, we're just going to start by figuring out first roughly the angle we want the legs to be in. So in my case, again, I'm going with the super characteristic Mario jump. And so I'm going to have the leg in the front go upwards and then downwards, and the opposite for the leg in the back. So to do that, I can just go ahead, measure the width of the head, then place it over kind of this booty / pelvic section of the character. And use that to map out the top of the leg. And then same thing to map out the bottom of the leg. So for now, I'm really just going with essentially the shape and the angle I want for the legs. So really just these very basic straight lines. I'm going to do the same thing for the leg in the back. So just the width of the head, placing it over the pelvis. And from there, all you have to do is thicken the area around these lines to create a cylinder instead of just this kind of stick figure legs. If you are enjoying this tutorial so far, please consider helping the channel by giving this video a like and subscribing if you haven't already. Now, I know everyone on YouTube is asking you to do that, but believe it or not, it does help us and our channels a lot because it just tells YouTube to take the video and show it to more people. So thanks for helping. And the feet are going to be, well, at the bottom of the leg, but they're not going to be longer than the bottom of the leg. They're actually going to overlap a little bit in that bottom section of the leg. Now the length of the feet is going to be the same again as the length or the width of the head. So you can just measure the width of the head, overlap that with the bottom of the leg, and then draw a big oval for the shoe. Great, so this is really the base structure of our character. Now before we move on to drawing the outlines, we're going to just add a few more guides and maybe move some shapes around to make sure we're super happy with this structure. So we're going to start by adding two guides on the head, which is what I usually call the plus sign. And that plus sign is just to see or to help you visualize where the facial features are going to be. So essentially it is one slightly curved vertical line that divides the head in two halves. So it would run across the nose essentially. And then one slightly curved horizontal line, which would align with where the eyes are going to be. So in my case here, my Mario is kind of looking 3/4 of the way, so I'm going to draw this slightly curved line here, and then another horizontal one right there. Now once we have that, we're also going to be able to place the hat in the ear. So the ear is going to be slightly above the horizontal line, and it's just going to be a big oval. Now you can use the size of the ovals you used for the shoulder socket as your example, or as your reference, I should say. So you can just measure that and put it so that it overlaps with the horizontal line, but is a little bit higher than the middle. So kind of here, roughly. And then the hat, this one is a little bit more tricky because you have to get really just a feel for it depending on how you're drawing your own character. Essentially, Mario's hat is this kind of curve in the back that comes like this in the front and then has, the kind of brim. So this is really the base shape we're going to go for no matter, how your character is. In my case, again, it's kind of 3/4 of the way. So the bump in the back is going to be not quite as visible, but still a little bit there. Then the one in the front is going to be really quite intense. And I'm going to have the brim of the hat that connects right above where the ear, if I zoom in a little bit, kind of in that corner here where the ear meets the head, it's going to be right above that. And it's going to create this big swoosh coming over the front of the forehead and then maybe overlapping with the hand and the arm a little bit. And then curving back towards the head. So something like this. Now the beauty of doing a character breakdown like this versus just going in straight to trying to draw just the outlines is that, well, not only you have a better understanding of the character and so you can modify it as you want, but it is also much easier to make sure you're happy with what you drew and the proportions so that they actually match the character before adding the colors and everything. So what I mean by that essentially is at this point, before moving on to creating the outlines, go ahead and pull out a reference. If you're drawing the same position Mario as what I'm doing, you can just pause the video. I will link my original illustration in the description so you can use that as a reference. But you're going to look at the reference and you're going to just make sure that everything is in the right angle and everything is the right size. So for example, I feel like my arm here, Mario right now is looking like a cheerleader. It's not looking so much like it's jumping. And I think it's because this arm is a little bit too high. So what I'm going to do, because it's just very base, rough shapes, it's not detailed, it's not colored, there's no shadow or anything, I'm just going to go ahead and use a selection tool. So in Procreate, there's one right here at the top. Setting it to freehand, and I'm going to draw a selection around these base shapes. So in my case, again, I want to move the hand and the arm. And with my arrow tool, I'm just going to rotate that so that it matches a little bit better with the actual movement that I want my character to be, doing. So yes, at this point, feel free to go ahead, pause the video, pull up a reference based on which position you want to draw. Again, mine will be linked in the description below, totally free, of course. And once you're satisfied with your basic structure, we're going to move on to drawing the outlines, adding the colors, and adding some super simple shading. Awesome! So once you're happy with your base structure, and by happy, I definitely don't mean that it needs to look good because it's going to look crazy at this point. But once you're happy with the proportion and the general position, we're going to move on to creating the outlines, which essentially is going to turn this mess into an actual illustration. So at this point, if you're working traditionally, you would just go ahead and pick either a coloring pencil that you want to use for the outlines, like a black, something like that. You could go with a pen, something to use to ink, really, whatever you want. If you're working digitally though, what we're going to do is we're going to start by lowering the opacity of our sketch so that we still see it, but it's not quite as in our face, otherwise it's going to be really distracting. And so to do that, if you're working with Procreate, super easy, you can just tap on the little N next to the check mark right here. And you're going to lower the opacity slider until you can barely see the sketch. Now in my case, I'm going to keep it a little bit more opaque so you can see it in the video, but really in your case, lower the opacity as much as you can before the sketch disappears. And then from there, we're just going to create a new layer above the sketch, and we are going to rename that new layer to Outlines. For the outlines here, I'm just going to go with a very simple pure black, so I'm just going to pick that. And you have a few different options for the brush you use depending on the final style, the final look you want your piece to have. So if you want to have something that looks a little bit more like the traditional video games or comics books, you would just go with either an inking brush or a basic round brush, really something that doesn't have any texture to it. It's just a solid, smooth, clean brush. I personally like to use brushes that have a little bit of grit in them, so kind of pencil brush or charcoal brushes. So if that's what you want to do as well, I encourage you to try and find a brush that has the word pencil in the name in your software. So if you're working at Procreate, that could mean, for example, going back to the sketching pack, but this time switching to the 6B pencil. Or if you do have my illustration bundle from the texture pack once more, this time the outlines brush. And the size of the brush, which is going to be the size of your outlines, is really up to you, but I do recommend you test it out before you start, just to make sure you're happy with roughly what the lines would be before you get started and just start drawing a bunch of lines and then realize, they're too big or too small. So in my case, whatever that was is what I'm going to go with. I like that. And the idea here is going to be just to find which of the messy lines that we drew we actually want to use in the final piece. And at the same time, we're going to refine the different shapes to start making it look like Mario. So for example, adding the shoes, adding the gloves, adding the facial features, and all of that. So speaking of the facial features, let's actually start with the face, because it's going to be probably the trickiest one. Not that it's hard, but it has the most details. And so we're going to start with the nose, because right now we don't have anything at all for the nose. And the nose is super simple. It is the same thing as the ear. So you can just visualize that oval, that ellipse, take it and then put it right below your horizontal line and over your vertical line of the plus sign. So I'm just going to do that right here. Like that. Then we're also going to draw the chin. Now, depending on the facial expression of your character, it could either just be the line of the oval or the circle that we have for the head. In my case, my Mario is super happy. He's jumping, so he has an open mouth. And because the mouth is open, the chin is going to lower a little bit. So I'm going to take that into account. And I'm also going to make that base circle a little bit more pointy. So it's going to look like, kind of like this. Bringing it upwards, creating a bit of a cheek, just like that. And again, the face is by far the most complicated outlines. Once we're done with that, it's going to be pretty smooth sailing for the rest. We're just going to go over the lines. So bear with me for now. We're just going to draw the face, make this Mario look like Mario, and then everything is going to be just fine. Great. Now we're going to draw the front of the face, so essentially kind of the side next to the eye and then the forehead, which is going to disappear in the hat. And so for that, you can just go slightly inside your circle, just like that. You can also come in and draw the ear, which you can just follow your oval, easy. And maybe we can add the hair. So you're going to have a little bit of a flop in the back. Not quite a mullet, but almost. So this little curve right here. And then we have two, little blobs, I guess, of hair for the sideburns that are going to come in front of the hair and below the brim of the hat. Just like that. Speaking of the brim of the hat, you can go ahead and draw that now if you want. So just following your shape. Maybe adding a bit of a thickness above it as well, because right now it's just super flat. So you could start kind of here. And then bringing that as a curve to connect it with the front. Might as well draw the rest of the hat while we're here. Super easy, you just follow the shape, adjusting it as needed if you want, of course. Great. Now we're going to draw the rest of the head and the face. So right now we're missing the eyes, the eyebrows, the mustache, and the mouth. So we're going to start with the eyes because they're pretty straightforward. We're going to just draw two ovals essentially, and it's going to overlap with the horizontal line that we have. Then from there we can draw the eyebrows, which are going to be essentially crescent moon shapes, pretty big ones that are going to overlap with the hat. It's kind of weird, it's like the eyebrow was above the hat. So you can just draw those really quickly, and you're probably going to need to come back in and erase any overlaps that you have with the brim of the hat. And with that, it is time for the secret password. So if you've watched this far in the video, please go ahead and let me know which position you're drawing your Mario in. So in my case, it's just kind of jumping and being excited. But again, because we're doing a breakdown, your position could be completely different. And if you're new on the channel, you might be a little bit confused with what is the secret password thing. Essentially, it's a game that we play here in all of the long form step-by-step illustration videos that I post. I hide either a question or just one word for you to find. And that secret password does a few things, but the main one, believe it or not, is that it does give me a lot of insight into how to edit and pace my videos better, which helps me create better tutorials for you. So once more, if you've watched this far, just let me know which position your Mario is in, and then we're going to keep going. From there, we're going to move on to the mouth, and the mouth is just going to be essentially a D shape, so just the letter D, but on the side. And once more, it's going to align with the vertical line. If your mouth is open, like in my illustration, we're going to draw some teeth at the top. So just a little line like this, maybe giving or leaving a bit of a gap on the side. And we're also going to draw a tongue, which is going to be pretty big. So we're not going to see the back of it. We're just going to see the side right here. And if your mouth is open, or if your Mario's mouth is open, you could also add this kind of curve under the mouth, just to show, yeah, that it's open and the lip is kind of overlapping with the chin. And from there, all we're missing on the face, probably one of the most important features is the big mustache. And so the mustache is going to be going upwards a little bit with a little bit of a curve. So we're going to start by drawing that, and it's going to go a little bit past the eye. So you can just start that at the bottom of the nose and create this kind of curve right here. And then it's going to have a bit of a cloud shape on the bottom. So we're going to have 3 little semicircles on each side of the mustache. Like this, aligning it with, or stopping that third one with the vertical line that we have in the middle. And then on this side, it's kind of curving and disappearing behind the nose. I'm just going to draw pretty much 2. That's all I'm going to have the space for. Great. Now the rest of the body is going to be significantly easier. We're just going to follow the basic lines and maybe add some extra details. So let's go ahead and start with the chest, which is going to be the exact same curve that we have for the circle of the body. So you can just go ahead and draw that. And then the back, depending on your Mario's position, is either going to be just the curve, or because here he has his leg up, we kind of see the butt poking out a little bit more. So it's going to be kind of a peanut shape. So just following the top circle, then coming in and following the bottom circle. And from there, honestly, you can just kind of continue with this curve to draw the bottom of the leg. So really just follow the line you have. And then you can draw just a curve that goes from the back of the leg to the front of the leg to draw the bottom of the pants, kind of like that. And then you just come up and around to draw the front of the leg. Now here again, my Mario is really jumping, so this front of the leg is going to be kind of weirdly folded. So I'm just going to start with the knee here, and I'm going to bring this line around and in. Then we're going to move on to the back leg, which is going to be even easier in my case because we don't see any folds over the body, so we can just follow the curves or the lines that we had from the sketch. And then just moving on to the natural progression, which is going to be the shoes. So for the shoes, the top is going to follow the curve that we have, but the bottom is going to be flat, obviously. So you can just draw a straight line for the bottom. And then follow the curve for the front and the back. Now I also have some very simple soles on these shoes, and so for that, what you can do is just draw an extra little bit of thickness in the front and the back. The heel part is going to be a little bit more narrow, and then the front of the foot part is going to be longer, but it's going to curve when it connects with the heel. So the heel is really just this flat section, but then the front is going to be flat, and then it's going to curve in. So we're going to do the same thing with the other shoe. So again, just a kind of straight line for the bottom, curved line in the back, curved line in the front, and then two slightly thicker sections for the sole, starting with maybe the heel. Now before we move on to the last little section we have to do, which is the arms, we're going to draw the overalls. And so these are quite easy as well. Essentially, it's a big rectangle that ends with a bit of a point, and then on top of that, you just draw two huge circles for the buttons. So I'm going to go here. The first one, finishing the bottom with this kind of triangle shape, and then drawing a big circle for the button. Doing the same thing for the other one, although in my case, again, my Mario is kind of 3/4, so we're not going to see the other one as much. It's mostly just going to be the thickness of that part of the overall, and then the thickness of the button. And once you have essentially kind of the suspender part, you're just going to draw the shape of the rest of the overall. So you're just going to connect the front here with this slightly curved line, and you're going to connect the back with a big curved line. Great. So then last but not least, in our outlines, we're going to draw the arms and the hands. Now the arms, you can really just follow the cylinder shape you have, so super, super easy. Now the hands are going to be a little bit trickier, obviously, because we have to draw the fingers, but because they're gloves and it's a cartoon character, it's really not that tricky. So we're going to start by just drawing the base of the glove, which is going to be essentially a big sausage. And then we're going to come in and we're going to draw little curves for each fingers. And once we connect all the little curves, essentially we're just going to have the glove final. So we're going to start with one sausage for the finger, or the finger for the thumb. Can draw maybe the side of the hand as well, so you can just follow the guides that you had from the sketch. And then that's where we're going to draw our little curves. So essentially what we're going to do, at least in my case, because Mario is kind of doing this fist shape, we're going to draw these kind of curvy shapes, and we're just going to repeat that all over the hand until we have 4 fingers plus a thumb, 5. So the first one is going to be here. Then we have another one that overlaps just a little bit with the thumb. Third one here. And finally the pinky, which you're going to start where, the side of the hand ends. Once you do have these lines, all you have to do is just connect the top. And then starting from the pinky, we're going to create the bottom. And so essentially we pretty much just have to draw the pinky one, which is going to be, maybe I need to make my pinky a bit thicker. Let's just do that real quick first. There we go. So we're just going to draw a bit of a curve for the bottom of the pinky. And because in my case the hand is kind of squished, we're going to have another little curve that is going to be essentially this part of the finger. So that's it. And then from there, all you have to do is connect the bottom of the fingers with the one right next to it. Now this one is going to be significantly easier because we don't see the inside of the finger, we just see pretty much the knuckles. So we're going to start in the same way. We're going to draw the little sausage for the start of the glove. Kind of like this. Then we're going to draw the top of the arm, or the top of the hand, which is going to follow the curve that we have in our sketch. And we're going to draw the thumb, which is also going to start by following the curve that we have in the sketch. Maybe refining that little sausage a little bit. And then we're just going to draw, these, there we go, this part of the finger, so just kind of the knuckle and the first section. And for that, super easy, we're just going to go with straight lines that then connect at the bottom with a curve. So 1, 2, 3, that one might be a bit too far. There we go, 3. And then we can just connect the bottom like this, like this, like this. And then this finger, the index, is going to be curved a little bit. So similarly to what we did for the pinky here, we're just going to bring that shape in, follow the same kind of curve as the other ones do to start with. Bring it inside, drawing the tip of the finger, and then drawing a bit of a curve for where the finger is kind of smushing inwards. Great, so once you have all your outlines mapped out, it is worth once more taking the time to pause the video and tweak the shapes one last time before we start adding the colors. So that might be, for example, in my case, I feel like my Mario looks a little bit too fit. I need to add a bit more of a belly, so just looking at a reference picture, I could figure that out pretty quickly. So it's just a case of maybe erasing that bottom section belly here. To make it a little bit more, a little bit more of a rounder, thicker character. So once more, feel free to pause the video here, take all the time you need to tweak your outlines, and once you're done with that, we're going to meet up in the next chapter, which is going to be super easy. At this point, it's like we're working with a coloring book, and we're just going to add the colors. There's a free color palette for that, so it should be pretty straightforward. Great, so at this stage, we're again just working with a coloring book, so it is super, super easy. We're going to start by either erasing, if you're working traditionally, any kind of weird sketch lines that you have. If you're working with a digital art software, super easy. All you're going to do is you're just going to hide your sketch layer. So we're going to do that right now. And then we are going to add the colors, just flat colors to start with. Now, depending on the software you're using, there are a few different ways that you can do that. One of them, the most simple one, would be just creating a new layer under your outlines and renaming that new layer to colors. And then just using a super basic round brush that doesn't have any texture, any transparency, just a circle essentially. Just picking your colors, drawing the outline, and then filling the shape. So I'm going to show you an example real quick. And to make this step super, super easy, if you want, I included a color palette. There we go. That you can download for free. It is linked in the description below as well. So feel free to pause the video, go ahead and download that if you want. But essentially, technique number one would be, for example, picking the red here at the top. And let's say I'm going to start with the hat. So I'm just going to pick a round brush, maybe from the airbrushing pack, free brush that comes with Procreate, the hard brush. And then I would just, adjust the size, but I would just draw the outline of that shape, so of the hat in this case. There we go. And then I would just drag my color in to fill in that shape. So that is technique number one, but if you're working with Procreate, there's an even quicker technique or strategy that you could use. I'm going to keep my red because might as well, it works. But what you could do is go on your outlines layer and activate what is called reference. So for that, you can just tap on the outlines layer, which is going to open up the layer menu here. And if you go towards the bottom of that menu, you're going to see reference right here. So if you tap on that, and if your outlines layer is at the top, Procreate is essentially going to think from now on, whatever you color drop needs to stay within the outlines. And so what that means is even if you're working on a different layer, which I recommend you do, it's always a good idea to keep your outlines and your colors separate. But what you could do is just pick a color and drop it onto a shape to fill it in. Now you're probably going to need to adjust what is called the threshold, and to do that, super easy. You just keep your pencil on the screen and you move it towards the left to reduce the threshold until it fills only the amount or the space that you want to fill, or towards the right to increase the threshold to fill more areas. So the idea here is just finding the moment right before the color fills in too much space. So in my case here, it was around, I think, 78%. And so really just doing that with all the different colors and all the different areas. So I'm going to stop talking here to let you focus on filling in your colors, but I'm going to keep my video going in the background if you want to use that as a reference on how or where to put the different colors. Again, if you're using the color palette, that should be pretty easy because everything is in there, and Mario is pretty basic in terms of the color palette. And just a tip here, make sure you also fill in with white because we're going to add a background in a second, so you need to fill in the white areas as well. And if you're struggling to see that as you're doing it, you can just hide your background color for now, which should allow you to see a little bit better what you're doing. Great, so once you have all your basic colors, we're going to go ahead and we're going to deactivate the reference tool here just to make sure that we don't get stuck with that later down the road. So you can just tap back on your outlines layer and deactivate reference from the menu here. Now you're probably noticing we're missing a few key elements like the eyes and the hat. We're going to do that in just a second, but first we're going to set the background color. So for that, if you're working in a different software, super easy, you just create a layer below everything you have, you rename that layer to background, and then you just drop whatever color you want to use to fill in that layer. If you're working with Procreate, there's always a background color layer that comes with any canvas you create, so you can just select that, tap on it, and then set it to whatever color you want. So here, I'm going to go with just a really dark blue, which is just a darker version of Mario's overalls. And in the color palette, it's going to be hard to see in the video, I'm pretty sure, because it's pretty similar to the kind of dark gray that comes with the palette. But it is this one right here on the very far bottom right corner. Great, so from there we're going to move on to drawing the eyes, and the reason we didn't draw them when we were just dropping the colors is we don't have outlines for the eyes because there are no outlines usually in the Mario characters around the iris and the pupil. So we're just going to create a new layer below the outlines but above the colors. And we're going to rename that new layer to Eyes. And here you could keep working with a hard round brush if you want, but I'm going to go with the same brush I used for my outlines, just so I have the same kind of texture and interest in these details. And so that could mean either a pencil brush like the 6B pencil, or a different pencil brush if you're working with a different software, or in my case, from my illustration bundle in the texture pack, the outlines brush. And we're just going to start by drawing two ovals for the irises. And these are going to be kind of a teal color, which is right here in the color palette. So you get to decide which direction Mario is looking in. My illustration, I'm having it look at us. This one might be a little bit too big, actually. So really taking the time to make sure you're happy with the irises. That's one reason we're drawing them on a separate layer as well, is so that you can quickly erase or redraw without having to worry about the colors underneath. Because the eyes are just so important, it's really worth taking the time to just play with the different shapes until it looks right to you. Now, when it does look right to you, what we're going to do is we're going to add a bit of a gradient in the iris. So we're going to use the same blue we used for the overalls for that. So either just color picking it from the overalls, if I can do it. There we go. Or just going back in the color palette at the bottom of the left column here. And so here, still on the eyes layer, we're just going to start by drawing pretty much just an outline using that darker blue. So an outline around the iris. And then you're going to maybe put your brush, or your pencil, I should say, kind of slightly at an angle to create more of a gradient towards the middle. Now, if you're struggling to create a nice gradient, you can just go back and forth between the two colors, or you could just go back, select your teal once more, and kind of soften your gradient that way. Now, by doing that though, I just realized I went right outside of that iris, and now I have blue all over the rest of the face. Well, not all over the rest, but over the rest of the face a little bit. So I'm just going to come back in and erase that. Cleaning it up real quick. Great. And then we're going to draw the pupil, which is just going to be like a black oval to start with. So you can just color pick your outlines, because at least in my case they're black. Then coming over and drawing the same shape that you have for the iris, but smaller, obviously. And then at the bottom, you're going to leave a circle that is not going to be colored, so that we can see essentially the color of the iris through the pupil. It's kind of like it's a reflection or something. Same thing on the other side. And we're going to finish the eyes by adding a white highlight at the top, so you can just color pick whatever white you have in your piece. And roughly the same size as this kind of blue circle we have, but this time at the top. Just drawing that little highlight. Great. Now while we have the white, we're also going to draw the M on Mario's hat. So you can just go ahead, create a new layer, still below the outlines, but above everything else. And you're going to rename that new layer to, I guess, just M. Now once more, we're drawing it on a separate layer so that we can easily erase, move stuff around if we need to. But essentially the idea here is we're just going to start by drawing a circle at the front of the hat. And then in that circle, we're going to draw a big M. Now the M is very characteristic, so I'm going to give you some pointers on how to draw it so it looks like a Mario's M. We're going to start by drawing the two side branches that are slightly curved inwards. So instead of just having a straight line like this, you're going to have a slight curve. Doing that on this side as well. And then the bottom parts of the M are actually angled as well. So angled towards the inside of the hem, like that. Otherwise, the middle is pretty straightforward. You're just drawing this kind of V shape twice. And then connecting it to finish up the M. Now, because it is such an important element, I think it is worth taking the time to come back in and tweak that M. So once more, just either look at what I'm doing or look at the reference picture. I think in my case, the shape is pretty good, but it's a little bit small. So I'm just going to come in with my eraser and just make it a little bit bigger. Great, so once more, feel free to pause the video here if you need more time to work on the piece, and then we're going to meet up in the next stage, which is going to be finishing up the piece by adding some super simple shadows and lights. Awesome, now I'm realizing here I'm missing a little bit of details in the ears, so I'm going to do that real quick, just going back on my outlines layer, color picking my black, and drawing essentially this little curve here that follows the top of the ear. And then just a semicircle at the bottom. Great, now from there we're going to add the shadows and the lights, which we're going to keep super simple in this case, super basic. It should just take a few minutes, but it's going to help the piece pop a little bit more. Right now it's super flat. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new layer above everything we have for the colors, but below the outlines. And we are going to rename that new layer to shadows. Now here, if you wanted, obviously you could go ahead and color pick all the different colors you have. So for example, the blue here, make it darker, and then draw your shadows that way. That could work. But if you want to be a little bit more efficient, what we can do instead is just use one color for all of the shadows, draw everything on that one layer, but then use what is called a blending mode on the layer. So essentially a blending mode is going to take that shadow layer and it's going to blend the color of the shadow layer based on what is underneath. So the color we use is going to adapt and just change based on if it's over red, if it's over the skin tone, or over blue, etc. So the blending mode we're going to use here is going to be either multiply or linear burn, depending on what you prefer and what you have available in your software. I think here I'm going to go with linear burn. And blending modes are super common, so you should have them in your software, and usually they are with the opacity slider. So in Procreate, the way to access blending mode is tapping on the little N next to the check mark. And you're going to see, yes, we have the opacity slider that we used before, but we also have this big list with a bunch of weird names, which are all blending modes. So again, we're going to go with either multiply or linear burn here. Multiply would be at the top, but I'm going to pick linear burn. It's just a little bit more colorful, I feel like, than multiply. So that's what I'm going to go for. And we're also going to lower the opacity of that shadow layer a little bit, just so we have a better idea of what we're doing as we're doing it. So in my case, I'm just going to set it around 50% for now, but we can always come back and play with it later down the road. Now, in terms of the color that you're picking for your shadows, that is totally up to you. The only thing I would recommend is avoiding going in with a neutral gray, because then your shadows are going to be really muddy, and that's not the best look. So anything that has a bit of color to it is going to work really well here. You can experiment, you can try different things. I like to have shadows that are more of a purplish gray, so that's exactly what I'm going to pick. Right here, this one in the color palette, I say purplish gray, but it's not quite gray, it's more of a normal purple. But anyway, you can really experiment with whatever colors here. That's totally up to you. Now similarly, for the brush, you can experiment with different things. If you were working with a hard brush that did not have any texture for your outlines, I would recommend going here with a brush that doesn't have texture either, but maybe something a little bit softer. So for example, working with Procreate, a free option would be in the airbrushing pack. Instead of using a hard brush, which has, yes, really hard edges, going with something more like a soft brush. So it's still a circle, still doesn't have texture, but at least it has a little bit of feathering to create that gradient on the edges. If you are working with a textured brush for your outlines, I recommend having textures in your lights and shadows as well, just to make the piece feel a little bit more coherent. So what you could do here is switching from a pencil brush to something like a charcoal brush. So if you're working with free Procreate brushes, you could go in the charcoal pack that comes with the app and picking something like the Willow Charcoal. If you are working with my illustration bundle though, we're going to pick, still from the texture pack, the basic texture brush. Now you can draw your shadows really wherever you want. If you need a little bit of help, what I like to do sometimes is just draw or create a scrap layer and draw my light source. In my case, let's say I want my light source to be kind of right here on the top. And then you can draw kind of the rays of lights. And then with these rays of light, super easy. If you go back on your shadow layer, what you could do is, for example, follow one of the rays. Let's say I start with this one and see where it hits a shape. So in this case, it would hit kind of this side of the head. And then below that shape, you would draw a shadow. So the head here is casting a shadow on the shoulder and the hair. So you can just draw that shadow quickly and easily. So just following all the rays, seeing whenever they hit something. If I follow this one, I can see it hits, you know, the kind of sausage at the start of the glove. So that could be casting a shadow on the rest of the glove. You know, you get the idea. So I'm going to stop talking once more to let you focus on drawing your shadows, but I'm going to keep my video going in the background, of course, so you can use it as a reference if you want to have the same kind of light source as I do. So once you've mapped out the main shadows, you can just go back and hide or just completely delete that light source sketch that we have. But we might go ahead and add some extra shadows just to amp up the 3D feel of the piece a little bit more. So right now we have what is called cast shadow, so an object casting a shadow on another one. But there's another type of shadow that is really helpful when we're drawing illustrations, and these are called form shadows. And essentially it's the same idea of you have the light that comes and hit an object, but instead of considering where that object would cast a shadow, you consider how that object is curving away from the light. So let's see here, I have the nose, for example. That's a good one because it's a big curvy thing. The light would be coming here and hitting the top of the nose, but then the nose is curving away from the light, which means at the bottom of the nose, I won't be getting light. So I could go ahead and draw a bit of a shadow there as well. Now, cast shadows are usually pretty hard in the terms of they have hard edges, but form shadows are much softer because it's not a shape creating a shadow on another one. It's really just a shape curving away from the light. So if you want to amp up your piece, you can add a few of these form shadows everywhere, or on specific elements if you want, I should say. I'm not going to add too much because I don't feel like I want to make this Mario look too 3D in my mind, because it has these really thick black outlines. It's more of a cartoonish comic book style character than, a 3D character. So I'm going to really just use them sparingly on parts of the illustration that feel a little bit too flat. So in theory, there would probably be a shadow here on the face, but I feel like if I go ahead and add a shadow on this side of the face, it's just starting to be a little bit busy, so I'm not going to add one there. But on parts like these sections of the glove, or this section of the glove, I should say, that is just flat and one monochromatic color, I could go in and just very gently brush in a little bit of those form shadows. So in this case here, we have the glove or the hand that is bent like this. So if the light hits the top, there's not going to be light on this section. So essentially that's all I'm doing here. Adding these very simple shadows. Same thing, I feel like this part of the overall is just such a flat blue, so I'm going to go ahead and add a bit of a shadow on the bottom left for both the back, the butt, and the back of the leg. Again, just to break up that otherwise super flat shape. Maybe a tiny bit on the arm here. There we go. Now we can also add a shadow under the character to make it look like it's either standing on the ground or jumping away from the ground. And I like to draw these shadows on a separate layer so that I can have them be behind the character. So let's go ahead and create a new layer. Put it below everything we have in the list. And let's rename that new layer to Ground Shadow. Now, same thing as we did for the shadows on the character, we're going to use a blending mode, making sure you're sticking with the same one you used for the characters, in my case, linear burn. And once more, we're going to start by lowering the opacity around 50%. And here we're really just going to draw essentially a kind of a thin, flat oval. In my case, my character is jumping, so I'm going to draw that oval a little bit below the foot, so it's not touching the foot. But if your character was standing, you would just draw that oval right below the character, so touching the feet. And once you have all those shadows, you can just come back in and play with the opacity of the layers until you have something you like. In my case, I think I'm actually going to keep it around 50%. I like the amount of contrast that this creates. Although, because my background is so dark, I might make the ground shadow 100% just to make sure that we can actually see it. And from there, the last thing we're going to do is adding some highlights. It's going to be even easier. So go ahead and just create a new layer above your shadows but below your outlines, and rename that new layer to Lights. Same thing here, we're just going to pick one color, and we're going to use a blending mode so that one color blends with whatever is underneath. So the blending mode we're going to use in this case is going to be Add. Now Add is also very, very common, so you should be able to find it in your software. If you can't, just kind of draw one quick highlight and then scroll through the list and see which kind of blending mode you would like to use instead. So in my case here, Add is right there, but Add is super, super strong. So we're also going to start by lowering the opacity, but this time probably more around 30% or so. And similarly to the shadows, you can pick really whatever bright color you want for your lights, but I would recommend just avoiding going with just a neutral white, because once more, that doesn't give a lot of life to your lights and makes them look super flat. So I usually go with a bright yellow color that might even be a bit more of an orange. So just something along those lines. In the color palette, it's right here. And what I like to do, which is just a part of my style, so you could do something completely different, of course, if you'd rather. But what I like to do essentially is I like to outline my outlines. So what I mean by that is whenever you have an outline, so the end of a shape that is facing towards the light source. So in my case, it was, the top right of my canvas. I'm just going to go ahead and outline that outline with light. So I'm just going to go over the piece and essentially kind of show you what that would mean. So all the different elements, whenever there's an outline facing the top right, really just quickly outlining that. So the hat, the brim of the hat, the eyebrows, maybe actually adding some extra highlights on the nose because it's so big and round. Yeah, that's fun. Let's go with that. Highlight on that top of the mustache here, the hair, you get the idea. And there you go. Now if you want to learn how to draw more of your favorite characters, I highly recommend you check out this playlist because I have a bunch more character breakdowns for you. Some easy, some hard, some medium. There's a little bit of everything for everyone. But before you leave, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I post every Tuesday and Saturday. Then click on the link right here and I'll meet you there.